The distress signal came from deep space, weak, ancient, yet still repeating. It pulsed through the darkness, a desperate cry that had traveled for who knew how long. On board the USS Valor, Captain Elias Morgan watched the signal's waveform on the screen, his brows furrowed. "This can't be right," murmured Lieutenant Harris. "The signal's been traveling for at least 1,000 years, maybe more." Elias leaned forward. "And yet, it's still active. Someone sent this distress call long ago, and either they're still waiting, or something else is." The United Human Federation rarely ignored distress signals, even from unknown sources. Humanity had fought for centuries to claim its place in the galaxy, and if there was one thing they believed in, it was answering a call for help. The crew worked fast, pinpointing the source. It came from an uncharted system, far beyond the usual trade routes. No known colonies, no major stations, just a dying red star and a handful of planets orbiting it. A graveyard in space. Admiral Vasquez's orders were clear. Investigate. Recover survivors if possible. And be prepared for anything. As the Valor and its escort ships slipped into faster-than-light travel, tension grew among the crew. The unknown was always dangerous. After 3 hours in slip space, the fleet dropped into normal space, and silence greeted them. The system was dark and empty, except for a single planet circling close to the dying star. It looked lifeless, covered in thick, gray clouds, with massive scars across its surface. A world that had seen war. "The signal is still coming from the surface," said Ensign Patel, eyes fixed on her console. "Beneath the ground. Deep underground." Elias exhaled. Underground meant something was hiding or buried. The Valor scanners picked up no active energy sources, no movement, no ships, only ruins stretching for miles. But the signal remained. "Launch a recon team," Elias ordered. Within minutes, a small team of Marines and engineers descended to the surface in a dropship. As they passed through the clouds, the devastation became clearer. "This wasn't just a war," one of the Marines muttered. "This was extermination." The ruins were ancient, yet signs of high technology were everywhere. Massive towers now shattered, craters that hinted at orbital bombardment, metal husks of ships long dead. Whatever civilization had once lived here had been erased. But something had survived. The team landed near the source of the signal, a cracked, metallic entrance leading underground. Faint power readings trickled from below. "This place should be dead," the engineer whispered. "But it's not." As the team stepped inside, the darkness swallowed them. Their flashlights revealed long metal corridors, broken screens still flickering, and walls marked with strange alien writing. The deeper they went, the stronger the signal became. Then suddenly, a sound. A faint metallic scraping echoed from the darkness ahead. The team froze. Someone, or something, was still here. The team moved cautiously through the underground corridors, their footsteps echoing in the cold, dead silence. Dust floated in the air, disturbed only by their presence. The walls, once pristine metal, were now scorched and broken, marked by the passage of time and war. The distress signal was growing stronger, pulsing through their comms like a heartbeat, steady and unrelenting. Lieutenant Carter, leading the squad, signaled for silence. The scraping sound had come from up ahead, beyond a half-collapsed doorway. The metal frame was warped, melted at the edges, a clear sign of energy weapon damage. Something had forced its way through here long ago. The team activated their visors, scanning for life, but all they picked up were faint energy fluctuations. No life signs. Yet the signal remained. "Command, we've reached the source," Carter whispered, adjusting his rifle. "Something's still active down here." Captain Elias's voice crackled over the comms. "Proceed with caution. If there are survivors, extract them. If there's a threat, eliminate it." The team moved forward, stepping over debris, their weapons raised. Beyond the doorway, they found a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in the darkness. And at its center, a massive machine, still powered, still running after centuries. It was alien, covered in unknown symbols, wires stretching from its base like roots. A single console flickered weakly, displaying an unreadable script. But at the heart of the machine, encased in thick glass, was something that made the entire squad freeze. A figure, suspended in some kind of stasis pod. It was humanoid but not human. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, with sharp, angular features. It looked ancient, yet untouched by time. "What the hell?" one of the Marines muttered. Before anyone could react, the scraping sound returned, this time much closer. From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, something moved. A metallic figure lurched forward, its eyes glowing with a sickly green light. Then another, and another. The squad turned their weapons toward the movement. They weren't alone down here, and whatever was with them was waking up. The chamber was deathly silent, except for the low hum of the ancient machine and the flickering glow of the console. The team stood frozen, their weapons trained on the shifting shadows. The figures emerging from the darkness were not alive, at least not in the traditional sense. Machines, war constructs. Their frames were humanoid but twisted, reinforced with battle-scarred plating, their movements jerky yet deliberate. Their eyes, if they could even be called that, glowed with a sickly green light, scanning the intruders with an eerie, calculating intelligence. Lieutenant Carter clenched his jaw, gripping his rifle tighter. "Hostile contacts," he whispered into the comms, his voice barely above a breath. "Possible combat eye." The machine nearest to them twitched, its head cocking unnaturally to the side, as if processing their presence. Then, in a blur of motion, it lunged. Gunfire erupted. The squad fired in unison, unleashing a barrage of high-powered rounds, but the bullets pinged off reinforced plating. The machine staggered, its body jerking as metal tore away. But it did not stop. It kept coming. "Fall back," Carter barked, but another automaton rushed in from the side, its clawed hands swinging toward them with terrifying speed. Private Reynolds barely dodged in time, rolling across the floor as the machine's strike shattered a chunk of the metallic flooring. Sparks flew. The sheer force could have crushed a human skull with ease. More of them were crawling from the shadows. 5, 7, a dozen. They had been dormant for centuries, maybe longer, but now something had awakened them. "What the hell are these things?" one of the Marines shouted, his voice edged with panic. Carter didn't have an answer. "Keep moving." Defensive formation. The team backed toward the massive machine at the center of the chamber, their weapons firing in controlled bursts. One of the constructs took a shot to the head, its skull-like casing bursting apart in a shower of sparks and oil-like fluid, but it didn't scream. It didn't hesitate. It just kept coming. Then, suddenly, a blast of energy erupted from the stasis pod. A deep, guttural sound filled the chamber, a voice unlike anything they had ever heard. The ancient figure inside the pod opened its eyes. The machines froze. For the first time since they had emerged, the constructs hesitated, their glowing eyes flickering like unstable flames. They stood motionless, as if awaiting orders. And then, the stasis pod shattered. The being stepped forward, unfazed by the chaos. It was tall, regal, with an aura of power that pressed against the air itself. It turned its gaze toward the machines, lifting one hand, and in a voice that sent chills down the spines of every human present, it spoke a single command. The machines turned away from the humans, and then, without hesitation, they knelt. The air in the chamber was thick with tension. The squad stood frozen, their weapons still aimed at the constructs, but the machines did not move. They remained kneeling, their glowing green eyes dimming slightly, as if awaiting orders. The figure that had stepped from the stasis pod was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its armor was ancient yet pristine, dark metallic plating covered in intricate engravings that pulsed faintly with energy. Its face, partially obscured by an angular helmet, was humanoid but distinctly alien. High cheekbones, elongated features, and glowing silver eyes that radiated power. It exuded an aura of authority, something primal, something that made even hardened soldiers hesitate. Lieutenant Carter dared to take a step forward, his grip on his weapon tight. "Identify yourself," he demanded, his voice firm but cautious. The being turned its gaze toward him, its expression unreadable. When it spoke, its voice resonated through the chamber, deep and layered, as if multiple voices spoke at once. "You are human," it said slowly, as if tasting the word. Unexpected. The squad exchanged uneasy glances. Carter kept his stance firm. "Yeah, we are. And you are." The being exhaled, a strange sound that could have been amusement or something else entirely. "I am Commander Valtor, Supreme Warlord of the Akvari Dominion." It gestured toward the kneeling constructs. "These are my sentinels, the last remnants of my empire's might. And you," it tilted its head, studying them. "You are intruders in a place that was never meant to be found." Sergeant Hayes stepped forward. "We received an SOS, a distress signal." Valtor's glowing eyes narrowed slightly. Distress signal. It was as if the thought had not occurred to him. Then something shifted in his expression. "Ah, of course. The failsafe. It has been too long." "What happened here?" Carter asked, his voice steady despite the growing unease in his gut. Valtor glanced around the chamber, his gaze distant, almost sorrowful. "A war," he said at last. "One that should have never been fought." He gestured toward the constructs. "My people were once the rulers of this sector, an empire spanning countless systems. We were conquerors, builders, destroyers. But we were not invincible. Our enemies struck us down, one by one, until only this place remained, our last fortress, hidden in the void. I was placed into stasis, my sentinels left to guard me, awaiting the day we could rise again. But," his voice grew heavy, "that day never came." The squad processed his words in silence. Carter frowned. "If your empire is gone, who sent the signal?" Valtor turned to face him fully. "My creators built this vault with one final command. If we failed, if the empire fell, a call would be sent to those who could change the tide." He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "Tell me, humans, are you the ones who answered that call?" Carter hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. "We found it, yes. But we're not an empire. We're explorers, soldiers. We don't conquer." Valtor studied him for a long moment before nodding, as if coming to a decision. "Then you are different from those who came before." He turned his gaze to the ceiling, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps that is why the galaxy still stands." Before anyone could respond, a shrill alarm echoed through the chamber. The machines stiffened, their eyes flickering. Valtor's expression darkened. "We are not alone." A red holographic display flashed into existence in front of him, ancient symbols scrolling across the screen. His gaze hardened. "A fleet has entered the system. Not yours. They are coming here." Carter's blood ran cold. "Who?" Valtor's eyes burned silver. "The ones who destroyed my people. The ones who seek to erase all traces of what we were." His armored hand clenched into a fist. "They have returned." The weight of his words sent a chill through the squad. For centuries, this place had been forgotten, a relic of a war long past. But now, because of them, it had been found. And war was coming once more. The air in the chamber turned cold as the ancient warlord's words settled over the squad like a heavy shroud. Carter's grip tightened around his weapon, and he could feel the others shifting uneasily behind him. The machines remained motionless, their glowing green eyes flickering as if processing the revelation. Valtor stood tall, his silver eyes burning with a quiet fury as he stared at the red holographic display before him. The symbols were ancient, unreadable to the human eye, but the meaning was clear. The enemy was coming, and they were not here for diplomacy. Sergeant Hayes swallowed hard. "How many ships?" Valter's gaze didn't waver from the display. A battle group. Not their full might, but enough to glass this installation 1,000 times over. He turned his piercing gaze back to Carter. "You brought them here." Carter felt a sting of guilt, but he pushed it down. The distress signal was already active. If they were monitoring old channels, they would have found this place eventually. Valter's expression remained unreadable. Perhaps. But now, they come with purpose. He turned away, his long cloak flowing behind him as he strode toward the main console. His fingers danced across the ancient interface, symbols flashing as the long-dormant systems groaned back to life. The walls trembled, and from deep within the fortress, a low, mechanical hum began to rise. The sentinels stirred, their metal bodies straightening as their glowing eyes flared to life. Weapons, long silent, began humming with newfound energy. Carter felt the weight of history pressing down on him. They had uncovered something far greater than they had ever anticipated. A ghost of a fallen empire, now awakened on the eve of battle. "Lieutenant," Hayes said under his breath, "what do we do?" Carter didn't answer immediately. His instincts screamed at him to leave, to call for extraction, and put as much distance as possible between his team and the incoming fleet. But something inside him resisted. They had come here seeking answers, and now they had a choice. Run and let whatever was about to happen unfold without them, or stay and witness the storm firsthand. Valter glanced at them, as if sensing their hesitation. "You are not bound to this place," he said, his voice softer but no less commanding. "Your war is not my war. If you wish to leave, I will not stop you. But if you remain, know this: there will be no surrender." Carter looked at his team. They were soldiers, explorers, but above all, they were human. And humanity had never been known to turn away from a fight when the stakes were this high. He made his decision. "We stay," he said. Hayes exhaled sharply but nodded. The others followed, determination replacing their uncertainty. Valter studied them for a long moment before inclining his head. "Then prepare yourselves, humans, for what comes next will shake the future of this galaxy." The fortress rumbled, deep within its core, as the war machines of an ancient empire stirred from their slumber. And outside, in the cold void of space, the enemy fleet drew ever closer, their weapons primed, their intentions clear. The battle was coming, and humanity had chosen to stand. The enemy fleet had arrived. In the darkness of space, massive warships emerged from the void, their hulls gleaming under the distant starlight. They moved with terrifying precision, forming a blockade around the dead world. There was no warning, no attempt at communication. Only the silent, looming presence of annihilation. Carter and his team stood atop the fortress battlements, watching the incoming fleet through their visors. The holographic display before them flickered, marking each enemy warship in blood-red symbols. There were dozens of them, ranging from sleek attack cruisers to monstrous dreadnoughts, their weapon banks glowing with barely restrained power. Sergeant Hayes let out a low whistle. Well, they didn't come for tea and diplomacy. Valter stepped forward, his silver eyes locked onto the sky. His expression was unreadable, but his posture spoke volumes. He was ready. The fortress behind them groaned as its long-dormant defenses stirred. Monolithic cannons shifted, targeting systems coming online. Energy shields crackled to life, enveloping the stronghold in a shimmering dome of power. Deep within the ancient structure, the war machines, towering metal sentinels armed with weapons unseen for centuries, marched into position. The old warlord finally spoke. "They do not expect resistance." Carter exhaled. "Then let's surprise them." The first barrage came without warning. Columns of blue-white energy rained down from the heavens, slamming into the shield with enough force to shake the very ground. The barrier held, but only barely. The edges flickered, struggling against the sheer force of the bombardment. The enemy had no intention of taking prisoners. Inside the fortress, alarms blared. Sentinels moved into defensive positions, their heavy cannons humming to life. Valtor raised his arm, and a command pulse surged through the network, activating the last line of defense. From beneath the ruins, ancient turrets unfolded, rising from the depths like forgotten gods of war. Their barrels rotated, locking onto the enemy ships above. Then, the fortress fired back. Beams of emerald energy lanced into the void, cutting through the darkness with blinding fury. The first strike tore through an enemy cruiser's hull, splitting it in two. The second found a battleship, punching through its shields as if they were paper. Explosions bloomed across the sky. For the first time, the enemy hesitated. The humans didn't. Carter's team moved into position, taking control of the fortress' smaller artillery. Plasma bolts streaked toward the descending dropships, shattering them mid-air. Hayes barked orders, guiding the ground defenses as enemy fighters swooped in for strafing runs. The battlefield was chaos, fire and light colliding in a violent dance of destruction. Then, the enemy sent in their ground forces. Massive drop pods slammed into the rocky surface, unfolding to reveal armored troops wielding high-energy weapons. They advanced in perfect formation, undeterred by the ruins, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were elite shock troops, bred for war, trained for extermination. Valtor's eyes burned with something between rage and anticipation. "Let them come," he said. And then, the real battle began. The battlefield was chaos. Fire rained from the sky, energy beams sliced through the air, and explosions sent shockwaves across the ruined landscape. The fortress trembled under the relentless assault, its ancient walls cracking but refusing to fall. The defenders fought with everything they had. Artillery thundered, plasma turrets spat fire, and sentinels marched forward like unyielding titans. But the enemy was relentless. Their warships continued their bombardment, their soldiers kept advancing, and the weight of their numbers threatened to overwhelm even the most desperate resistance. Carter ducked behind cover as a blast of plasma seared past his helmet. He reloaded his rifle and glanced at Sergeant Hayes, who was barking orders to the remaining troops. Their numbers were thinning, but they were still holding. Barely. "We need something big," Carter growled, firing off a few shots. "Something that turns this fight around." Valtor stood atop the battlements, his gaze fixed on the sky. His silver eyes reflected the carnage unfolding before him, yet he remained calm, almost expectant. "The battle is not over," he said. "Reinforcements are coming." Carter frowned. "What reinforcements? We don't have anyone left." Valtor simply pointed. Then the sky burned. From the depths of space, a new presence arrived, a warship unlike anything the enemy had ever seen. It moved like a predator, its sleek, angular hull shimmering as it cut through the void. Its engines flared, and its weapons began to glow with an eerie crimson light. It was the last of its kind, a relic from another war, a monster built for destruction, a human dreadnought. The enemy fleet hesitated for the first time. Their battle formations wavered, their commanders struggling to process the sudden arrival of something so impossible. The dreadnought should not exist. It was a legend, a myth whispered in war councils and strategy meetings, the kind of warship that had reshaped galactic history. Now, it was here, and it was angry. The dreadnought's cannons roared, unleashing devastation upon the enemy fleet. Beams of raw energy sliced through cruisers, turning them into debris in mere seconds. Missiles streaked through space, striking with pinpoint accuracy. The void became a graveyard of shattered warships. The enemy's confidence shattered as their so-called unstoppable armada was torn apart. On the ground, the remaining enemy troops hesitated, their assault faltering. The sight of their fleet, once their greatest strength, being annihilated above them, drained the fight from their souls. Fear spread like wildfire. Carter grinned, tapping his communicator. "All right, boys. Time to clean up." The defenders surged forward, pushing the enemy back with renewed fury. Plasma bolts and railgun fire rained down upon the retreating forces. Some of them tried to fight, but most ran, their morale broken, their will shattered. The battle that once seemed lost had turned into a massacre. Within minutes, it was over. The last enemy warship exploded in the sky, and silence fell over the battlefield. The ruined fortress still stood, battered but unbroken. The defenders, exhausted and wounded, let out a collective breath of relief. They had won. Veltor watched as the dreadnought hovered above, its weapons now silent. He placed a hand on Carter's shoulder and gave a nod of respect. "Your people," he said, "are truly terrifying." Carter chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, and now the whole galaxy knows it." Above them, the dreadnought remained, a silent reminder of humanity's power. The war was over, but the message had been sent. Humanity was not to be underestimated.